Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Side Quests. We have reached another milestone. We are at another 50th episode, and for this 50th episode, I brought along with me, of course, my incredible co-host Geoff Moonen. You know about both of us. I realize we introduce ourselves at the top of every one of these episodes. This is in our feed. It's our podcast. I feel like folks know us by now.
But this could still be somebody's first episode of our show.
That's true.
So they might have seen the title and go, ooh, I like Super Mario World.
I mean, more than likely, they'll see our incredible guest and go, oh my God, that person's the biggest Nintendo fan I know. I have to listen to this episode. So yes, so you are listening to Side Quests. Typically, this show is about a 15 to 20 minute long monologue where one host, a rotating host, talks about a game they love and why they love it. For every 50 episodes, Geoff and I bring a game and a guest for three of us to talk about in a more wider roundtable format. And so, of course, I am Matty K. Stormageddon. I am the producer and creator of this series. I am also one of the producers and hosts of Fun and Games, the podcast feeder you were within. And I am joined, of course, by my co-host, Geoff.
Hi there, I'm Geoff Moonen. I am the other half of Fun and Games with Matt and Geoff. I'm a podcaster, video game fan, voice actor, musician, and all-around just nerd.
Yeah, that's a good descriptor. And then our incredible guest is the one and only Brian Shea. He is the online content director for Game Informer. He is the host of All Things Nintendo, and he's just a tiny bit of a Nintendo and Mario fan. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I know we've been trying to coordinate this, getting on the show in some capacity for probably a couple months now, so I'm glad we were finally able to make it happen, and it
Absolutely.
couldn't be for a better topic.
I agree, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Frankly, I was shocked. We were trying to figure out, we were racking our brains. What game do we do for 250? Looked over the list. No one has done Super Mario World yet.
Wild.
It's crazy to me. It's why I love this show also is because it's games that people love specifically. It could be the most obscure thing you've never heard of, and now you've heard of it, or it could be one of the most popular titles ever. And but there are still huge holes in that catalog of really well-known games. Like Brendan Groom did an episode on Super Mario Bros. 3, which is also one of those oh my God, why hasn't someone talked about this? But we are here to talk about Super Mario World. It is one of the SNES launch titles. It came out in North America in August of 1991. It was often included with the SNES, and it is considered to be one of the best side-scrolling platformers ever created. And there are a lot of reasons for that. But before we get into all of that, we are going to talk a little bit about our personal experience with this incredible game. I'll start, and then Geoff, and then we'll go to Brian. And I have a confession to make. I don't think I owned an SNES until 1997. And how I can track that is, do you guys remember the box, square redesign of the SNES that came
Model
out?
2, yeah.
So I had that. There's no way I could have had that model and have gotten this when it came out. I was a Sega Genesis fan first. Folks who listen to the show know that I have loved Sonic longer than Mario, but I love them both equally because I refuse to pick a favorite child. But yeah, I had that SNES, and I remember getting Super Mario World and Donkey Kong Country at the same time, which also would be impossible if I played this game when it came out. But of course, since then, I've played it a bajillion times. It is one of those games. I replayed it actually right before we recorded over the last 3 days, got through it in 2 sessions, about 5 hours, and remembered every song, every level, every secret. Well, not every secret. Star Road. We'll leave Star Road over here for now. But yeah, and so I've been playing Super Mario World probably since I got on the SNES back then, but I haven't played it a lot recently. But I was a late comer to the SNES, as I've talked about before, because I had a Sega Genesis first. I'm curious, Geoff, I feel like we've talked about this a bunch of times, but I can't remember. Did you have an SNES when it first came out?
No, I also got the Model 2. Actually, I traded a Nerf gun with a kid in my neighborhood for his SNES Model 2.
Good trade.
What?
Yeah, I still have it. I traded
that's
the
trading up.
Oh, it is. It was the hey. In his defense, it was the Nerf, the edgy boy eagle eye one with the laser sight on it.
But still, I'm saying if you're in a fantasy sports league and you complete that trade with somebody else, the commissioner's stepping in and vetoing it.
Oh yeah. No one stopped us.
Parents, nothing. Just
no
your own devices.
We were unsupervised. It's fine. But I still have that SNES, so I'm very proud of that. But
nice.
Yeah, I mean, I a lot of my friends had Super Nintendos. I had the NES, I got a PS1, and so that SNES was kind of like, even then being retro. But I definitely got Super Mario World, and I'd played plenty of levels. I don't remember when I first played it, but it was always super cool. And it was, when I got it, I devoured it. I went for all 96 exits. I don't remember how long it took me, but I became very much obsessed with it. And it's probably, even though I had the original trilogy of Mario games on the NES, I played them all to as much as you would expect me to. Super Mario World is probably the one that I have replayed the most and gone back to the most, and probably have the most. I never owned a strategy guide or anything. I had the Nintendo Power Strategy for Mario Brothers 3, but Mario World's the one that I probably got the most locked into my memory.
What about you, Brian?
So I didn't have an NES. And I would always go to like aunts and uncles' houses when they had NESs. And that's how I got introduced into video games, whether it was my one uncle who had like Contra, or my aunt and uncle who had like Zelda and Bubble Bobble. And then my other aunt and uncle had like Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, and Tetris. So it was like they all had different games. So I kind of got introduced into gaming that way. But I always wanted my own console. So I think it was Christmas 1993 that, my parents pulled the old like Christmas Story where it's like, okay, that's all the presents. Oh, wait, what's this behind the couch? And I opened it up and it was Super Nintendo with Super Mario World. Awesome. And that was like the first like console and first like console game. Because we had like some crappy games on the family computer. But like that was the first time I was like, oh my God, I have my own video game system. And, it was, we got Super Mario World and then a game that we just called Battle Tank. I think that's it. I forget what it's actually called.
I think that is the name of it. There is a game called Battle Tank.
I thought there was like a number or a name or something that like followed it, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was just called Battle Tank. So we got those for Christmas and I just played the crap out of it. And then my dad and I would play it a lot. And I've talked about this where like my dad traveled a lot for work. So like I would really only see him on weekends. And that quickly became a way that we bonded, was playing Super Mario World. And, eventually that expanded on to like Super Mario Kart, Mario Paint, Donkey Kong Country was a big one for us. So like the Super Nintendo was really a way for us to bond, because it was also still simple enough that like somebody who didn't grow up with gaming could like still enjoy it. Whereas like once we got to like the N64 era, he was like, he took like one look at that controller. It's like, I'm not going anywhere near that thing. But yeah, Super Mario World was like a really, really great platformer. It remains my favorite platformer of all time. I still maintain that it is the greatest 2D platformer ever created. And yeah, it's just a game that I have a lot of love for, and it's probably largely responsible for my continued fandom of Nintendo to this day.
Absolutely. I do have to say, I just double checked. Super Battle Tank War in the Gulf.
Okay.
It is in my collection, and I have played it, and I don't blame you for favoring Mario World.
Yes. I did play a little bit of that, and I was like, yeah, this is fine, whatever.
Yep.
I think that like we had like a pattern in my family where I would get one game, and then there was a game that was like perceived as like a game that my dad would get. So like I got Mario World, he got Super Battle Tank War in the Gulf. And then like when I got Donkey Kong Country, he got Madden 95. And it was like, okay. And like that was actually my introduction to Madden as well. That I got to play that, and I was like, oh, this is how football works. Okay, so that's how I learned how to play football.
I'm glad it's not just me, because like I learned how to play football from Tecmo Bowl on the NES with my dad. Like I had never watched a game. I just played that.
I learned how to play tennis through Mario Tennis and Virtua Tennis on the Dreamcast.
Amazing.
And then when I got injured and I couldn't play baseball anymore, I actually the next year, having never picked up a tennis racket, I made the tennis team of my high school because I knew all the strategies from playing Mario Tennis and Virtua Tennis.
Video games teaching us forever.
Right? See, video games can be educational, Mom. My mom doesn't care. I don't know why I said that. So, I mean, I think we're all in the pretty same boat that Super Mario World was seminal in some way for our fandom. I mean, it's funny, we've talked about this on the show before. Super Mario World is not my favorite Mario game of all time. That's still Super Mario 64, because the N64 was the first game the N64 was the first console I ever got at release and was looking forward to the launch. And so Super Mario 64 holds weight, but I will say, of the two of them, Super Mario World has aged better. I've gone back and played Super Mario 64, and I still love it, but definitely it's harder. The controls, all of that. Where Super Mario World, again, I played it a few days ago, and like just mainlined it because I loved it so much, and it's still so seamless. Also, the rewind feature on the Nintendo Switch Online is very helpful, and I'm grateful to have it, though I can beat it without it. But I leaned into it because, you know what? I wanted to get it done before we recorded today.
I completely forgot that I could do that.
Yes, you sure can. But I think the first thing I want to talk about with this game is how it looks, because going from Super Mario Bros. 3, which was a gorgeous NES game and a big step up from the previous two titles, to this game, like, it's just a whole different color palette, a whole different look, a redesign for all the characters. I feel like it's the first time we had like a major jump in like design for an NES franchise, right? I mean, this and Zelda both are like completely different, from the villains to the characters to the worlds, from things that were kind of iterated on in the NES versions. And I think to this day, I think the game still holds up quality-wise just from looking at it. I think sprite art is almost timeless, and for sure the sprite art in Super Mario World is absolutely timeless.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's a launch title, so it was absolutely the first one to show that kind of upgrade, because it was Mario World and F-Zero, and F-Zero didn't have an NES counterpart. And so it had to show everything out the gate, having the giant scaled sprite of the Bullet Bill, the Bonsai Bill coming in one of the first levels. It needed to sell that, especially because at the time, video games were, I mean, certainly home consoles had a little bit to prove. The NES had done great, and now we're coming out with another console. And it doesn't play the old games. Why do I need to buy my kid another console? It's a Super Nintendo, but it doesn't do that. This is ridiculous. It's a waste of money. No, we're not doing that. Why are we doing that? They had to sell it. They had to fulfill that promise. And so, yeah, no, they knew what they had to prove, and they did.
And not only that, but Sega at the time had just 2 months prior released Sonic the Hedgehog, which you look at the visuals of that compared to even something as great looking as Super Mario Bros. 3, and you can tell it's a definite step up in terms of like the vibrancy of the colors, the size of the sprites. Just everything looked so much better on the Genesis at the time. And also, look how fast everything was moving. Like, they really had to kind of throw down the gauntlet and be like, no, this is like what we're doing next. Like, yeah, the Genesis looks great, but this is how we're responding to like the improving technology.
Yeah, and the advertising from Sega definitely reflected that kind of feeling.
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is a game that was very prominent in my memory, but not one of the things that led me to buy the console. Funnily enough, the thing that made me want to buy this console was things like Super Mario RPG and Donkey Kong Country, because I'd played them a bunch at a friend's house. And we played this too, but it was a different, like, you know, this was one of the classics. It wasn't until I got my hands on it on my own, I was like, oh my God, not only is this gorgeous, but like the mechanics of it, the design of it, like just the way that you find secrets in this game is something that will carry on in different ways in all of the Mario games of the future. But there was almost nothing like this in the previous games. Super Mario Brothers 3 had, like, you would get Hammer Brothers or whatever, like secret things would pop up on the map depending on your score or other things, but it wasn't so defined as like there are whole secret areas that you could just completely miss playing this game, which I think also is a step up in design wise, not just graphically, but like what's in the thing.
Yeah, multiple exits and everything like that. Was just a game changer of like having the overworld map, just like you did in Super Mario Bros. 3, but like now you can find secret paths within those overworld maps. And it's like, all right, well, because in Super Mario Bros. 3, it was just like, all right, I want to get to that Toad house. Okay, I have to play through this extra level in order to get to that Toad house. Now it's like, oh, I found this like keyhole and I'm going to go into it. I found this key earlier in the stage, bring it to the keyhole. And now like there's a path that opens that goes through the lake. And it's like, it's just such a cool idea, especially back then, where it was like, okay, yeah, I didn't take like the typical point A to point B route. I took point A and went to point C, and now suddenly there's like new levels or maybe even an entirely new area. Or if you're like really cool and really awesome in that second world, you can find a secret area that's just power-ups. Yep. And like that was such a mind-blowing thing for me as a child.
Yeah, and the sort of, I mean, I loved Super Mario Bros. 3. I played it so much. And in thinking about this and going, well, what did I miss? You know, which one do I like better? I loved the massive inventory that you would get in Super Mario Bros. 3, this feeling of an arsenal, or if you were coming at a stage that was giving you difficulty, or the ways that you could traverse. But yeah, the path was visible the entire time. There were very few surprises that could come up. There was just that one in World 2 getting the warp whistle if you break the rock on the side. Other than that, it's all laid out. And I would almost argue that the simplification that Mario World made on the power-ups was all for the better. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. But as far as traversing the map goes, I don't think any Mario game before or since has done a better job of having a well-integrated, that multiple exit, the different ways you can assail it. The fact that you feel like World 4 is very short, but you can come at it from multiple angles, the multiple bridges. You can completely skip castles. It's not just go to warp zone or go to thing that makes you warp. It's all a piece and a part of it. And you can choose how you come at it and decide whether or not it's not just unlock every level, it's unlock every exit. And sometimes it's not a key in a keyhole. Sometimes it's an alternate, whatever the rising and falling tape, however the goal is called, an alternate goal, whatever it is. It encourages that sort of methodical exploration. You come to a short level that from the beginning has an additional exit to it, and you get there and you go, but where is it? Is it high? Is it low? People have argued that this is one of the easier Mario games as far as beating levels because you can just take the cape and fly over it, but that's not the challenge. If you just want to get to the end, great. But if you want to find everything, I think that Super Mario World encouraged finding secrets in a way that, again, before or since, I don't think Nintendo's quite hit it.
Yeah, I mean, I think like there are hints of this in other games, like the certain paintings in Mario 64 and things like that. But for sure, the lean on like wanting you to explore, like this was exploration before you could explore in a 3D space that was different. You were exploring the world map by finding these different exits. Also, the mechanics in this game are some stuff that we'll never see again. Yoshi continues on in different varieties and different games, but the keyhole never comes back. The tape replaced the flag, and then we end up going back to the flag in New Super Mario Brothers. Like the bonus rounds, both the 3 circle bonus rounds to get extra lives, which I was very good at this playthrough, and I don't remember ever being that good at it in the past. I think I just got very lucky. And then the bonus round where if you hit the tape every time you jump through the goal, eventually after you get to the number 100, it resets to 0, and you do like a bonus round for 1-ups where you have to play a matching game. Like there have been ways to match and get items in other games and since, but not like this. This is the one. I had like 60 something lives by the end of the game because they just throw so many 1-ups at you. I think because, again, Jeff's right. The challenge is not literally doing the thing. It's how you do the thing, right? You can get to this end. I mean, there are secrets to get you to the last world in, under 10 minutes. Like you can see there are paths that can get you right to the end, just like in many of the other Mario games. But I think if you really want to explore everything this game has to offer, that's when it becomes more difficult. And like we hinted at Star Road, but like there's a whole hidden area with some really cool stages, but they are still some of and the Special Road also are some of the hardest stages probably in Mario history. But that's only if you really want to engage with it. It is not required to being the game in the same way 100 stars, 999 moons, and whatever other insanity that has come since. It is in that vein of like optional, but really cool as well.
Now, do you prefer 2D or 3D Mario games?
I mean, it's a good question, right? Like I said,
2D.
Mario 60. Jeff, not a hard question to answer. For me, like I love Super Mario 64. I think I can't pick. I think it's hard. I think Mario 64 is still my favorite Mario game of all time, and I think it's because of the nostalgia for it. I think as far as which ones have had more quality games, I mean, I think that all of the early Mario titles still stand really strong, whereas like some of the early 3D titles, again, 64 hasn't aged well. Sunshine, I mean, arguably at the time not a lot of folks liked, but also hasn't aged great. And like from Galaxy on, I'd say has aged pretty well, but also Galaxy on the Switch I tried playing, not as good as it was on the Wii, right? It kind of required what the Wii had, unless you use the Joy-Cons like Wiimotes, which I never do because I'm always playing in handheld mode. But like, I think at the end of the day, I go back to the 3D games more. So I'd have to say 3D. Brian, you said this is one of your favorite 2D platformers of all time. I assume 2D is your preference.
It's challenging, right? Because like Mario in the early days, 2D was all it had, and every single one was a banger.
Right.
Then they made the transition with Mario 64 to 3D, and it took them a long time to look back. And I still think that Mario 64 is an incredible game. I mean,
Oh yeah.
For about 5 or 10 years, every single 3D game was either copying Mario 64 or was copying Ocarina of Time.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was the blueprint for 3D games. And pretty much every game that tried to copy that formula fell short of either Zelda or Mario because they got it so right in that first attempt. And I was never a big fan of Mario Sunshine. Still to this day, I'm not the hugest fan of it, especially now that it hasn't aged particularly well, even in the 3D All-Stars bundle. But Galaxy On, like you said, it's just every single one of those is amazing. And I'm a huge supporter of Mario 3D World.
Yes.
I think that is an incredibly underrated game just by the nature of it being on Wii U. Thankfully, they brought it over to Switch, even with some improvements. And I cannot recommend people check that game out enough. But like the 2D games in that era, they were good, but they didn't have the same magic that like the new Super Mario Brothers series. Like they didn't have the same magic as like Mario 3 or Mario World. And that's why I'm so excited about Mario Wonder, because it's like, all right, could this be like they realized that this formula with new Super Mario Brothers was getting a little stale. Now maybe they're going to shake things up a little bit and maybe try to recapture some of that magic. Like it certainly seems like they're leaning into kind of the weirdness of it all. So that's why I'm hopeful for that one. But it's because of that, it's so challenging. Because like if you ask me if I like 2D or 3D Sonic games better, it's probably going to be 2D pretty easily.
Right.
Yeah.
But with Mario, because like it felt like the 2D side of it kind of, well, for a while it went away entirely. And then when it came back, it was fun, but it wasn't like, it didn't feel as imaginative as Mario World or Mario 3 did.
Mm-hmm.
But the 3D games continued to be amazing. Like Galaxy Odyssey is actually my favorite 3D game in the series, and so it's like really challenging for me to pick. Like if you had to say like you can choose 2D or 3D, and then whichever one you don't choose goes away forever. I mean I guess I'd probably say 2D just because it has 3 in world, and like the new Super Mario Brother games are still fun, and Wonder looks really cool. But like, man, would that hurt to lose things like Odyssey and 3D World and just everything else in that catalog?
Absolutely. Now, and I had my quick 2D answer, not to say that I dislike the 3D games. They are fantastic. They've definitely gotten the lion's share of improvements and quality of life. But I think, for that same reason that if I had to pick one to save, I would go 2D. But they go hand in hand.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm glad you brought up 3D World, a game that I didn't play till it came to the Switch, but like 3D World is the perfect mix of both, right? Because it feels like a 2D Mario game as far as layout and completion of stages, but it is in a 3D space. And then Bowser's Fury, I think, is one of the best Mario games ever made. Unfortunately, it's really short, but like the concept is so really great because it is effectively an actual open world Mario game in the sense that we use open world today. But I agree. I think it's just I think one hand washes the other in a way that I don't think Zelda does, right? Like I think you can have one or the other. There are bangers in both, though nothing is better than Minish Cap. I'm going to throw that in wherever I can. But like I think it is harder with it. And I think a game like this is a good example of that. I mean, we haven't touched on the music yet. This is, of course, a Koji Kondo joint. I was joking when I said that I was singing along to every song, but literally every song in this game I remember. I played it so much. They're so iconic. They are reused in tons of other stuff. A ton of these songs are even in the movie. Like, there's something about the overworld theme, the first stage theme, the ghost house theme, like, it's funny, we talk a lot about in Modern Mario how music sets a lot of the scenes, right? Like Boo's mansion in 64 is one of the creepiest Mario stages ever. That piano to this day, nightmares. But like that's all scene setting from the incredible music too. We first start to see that here. The ghost houses are spooky. The castles are spooky. I mean, hell, the final Bowser fight, I'll say to this day, is one of the more creepier designs for Bowser. He's this giant looming creature. The music's kind of creepy. Like you're throwing these weird puppet mannequins at him. It's just a bizarre fight altogether, but still one of the more iconic ones. And I think Koji Kondo's music absolutely made a lot of that happen. This game wouldn't be nearly as iconic without this incredible soundtrack.
And also the way the sound reacts to what is going on screen. Like when you get Yoshi, you get the bongos start playing, or when you're in a cave, your jumps are echoey. Like that is such a cool detail that probably you don't catch at first, but then you're like, oh wow, like that's something that happens like when you are in these situations.
Yeah, and the music has a lot of contrast of either frantic or spacious, where the overworld music definitely has a lot of like space and gaps, and even a lot and certain level tracks as well have that kind of space in them, and other ones are the athletic theme that is just ragtime practically. And I do love the fact that in addition to showcasing the fact that with the Super NES, the Super Mario World, look at the incredible sprites we can do, look at the vivid colors. Hey, we got bongos. We can put bongos in everything. You kids like bongos, right? And I mean, I do.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about this game musically, also from the other ones, is 'cause I would say that also all of the NES Mario games have iconic themes. Not all of them are. I mean, obviously, World 1-1 and Super Mario Brothers, and of course, the castle theme in Mario Brothers are super memorable. But I think there's something about this soundtrack where I think Koji Kondo really found his niche in being inventive with the music. A lot of the music in the NES era felt like NES music, right? Whereas I feel like Super Mario World is one of the more remixed albums, right? From people making lo-fi stuff to people making cool techno stuff. I think because of how inventive Koji's score is, and then going on even beyond this, I mean, Koji Kondo, obviously a living legend who's done so much Nintendo work, and across even genres and franchises. But like, I think something like this game is still some of his best work, if only because it was so new and so inventive, and you could do so much that you couldn't do on the NES. The sound palette was just so much more expansive.
And the way that Koji Kondo was able to make the limited number of channels on the Famicom and the NES work was through making the music very jazzy, through a lot of syncopations and a lot of utilizing the beats, because it was a much more limited palette. With Super Mario World, that limitation was lifted, but the identity had been sort of set for what Mario music feels like. And so there were some very fun explorations that came from that.
I think also the setting is something to talk about here. So we're in Dinosaur Land. And like, there is never another game here from now till since. Like, Yoshi is inserted into the Mushroom Kingdom practically. Although I do it's
like Chewbacca. It's a life debt, you know.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But like, this is a brand new world for Super Mario World. It's the same old story. You know, Peach is captured by Bowser. I think this is the first time though that we really, really got the narrative in the game. I think in all the Nintendo games, it was in the manual. You understood it when you beat it. But like this, you get the little blurb at the beginning. Along the way, you can hit boxes that give you narrative or game hints, and then like that whole final push. Like, and then the cutscenes. Yes. And this introduced like real cutscenes in a Mario game. Every time you broke a castle, Mario defeated it in a different way. And like, I think something we should all talk about is, do we have a favorite way he destroys a castle? I think, honestly, my favorite one is I think it's Castle 7 right before Bowser, where he just picks it up and tosses it. Like, after doing all these other things at the end of the game, he just picks up and tosses it and explodes. Like, do you guys have a favorite one that you remember of him taking out a castle?
Yeah. I think launching Ludwig's castle at the end of World 4 like a rocket, because it also, I mean, in addition to it just being funny and Mario's apparent confusion about it, what did he expect was going to happen? But also the fact that it ties into another thing that I like about the design of Super Mario World, which was dynamic changes to the map.
Yeah.
After that castle was launched, in that cutscene, it flies up, and in the background, it crashes into one of the hills have eyes, and then it has the little bandage on it. And after the cutscene's done, that bandage appears, and that's there. And it's just sort of, the glass is broken and the map is affected. And that's something interesting that I would love to see explored more in future Mario titles, 3D or 2D.
The one that stuck with me is like, he just kind of like comes back and then like gets a running start and starts like drop kicking it until it crumbles. I don't know why that's the one that popped in my head. All the other ones are great as well. And the one where he just like, the first one is where he like kind of just like does the old like minor explosion, like pushing down the detonator. But that's iconic just because it's the first one. But like, all of them are amazing.
I am a big fan of he just paints over it.
Yeah, that's very good. I always thought it looked like a broom. I was like, is he sweeping it away? I don't understand.
Nah,
just
that magic paint. It's the background now.
And I think this is like, Mario has a personality in this game in a way that he hadn't before. Or Luigi, if you play through the game as Luigi, the better Mario brother, if you ask me, but we're not going to get into that. But it's clear that Geoff and I are like little brothers, like in the sense that we are big Luigi fans. But
yep.
but yeah, I think that like this is the first time Mario really had a personality, which is why this game stands out to me. Even in Super Mario Brothers 3, there was a little bit of it, but this is the first time, and going forward, the first time we really see that Mario as a character, not just an avatar to move across the screen. And these cutscenes, this technology, I think is a big part of it. The plot is still damsel in distress, which is going to be that way for a long time. But I think that this is the first time where we have really characters as opposed to just bad guys. I mean, at the end of the game, when you beat it, spoilers, I guess, there's not just the credits for the creators, but it's one of the earliest. I think they did this in 2 and 3 also, but there are credits for the villains. Like, you get to see all the names of the bad guys. You get to see the Koopa Kids and Bowser, all of that stuff. And like, that also, I think, is a really cool thing. Yoshi is a character, even though there are many Yoshis. Yoshi is Legion, as far as we're concerned. I just think that, like, setting and character, this is the game to really set us off on a path that then is just perpetuated in all the games to follow.
Yeah, and that credit sequence is so good. Like, not only just like reflecting back on your entire journey to that point, but also just the music is fantastic. Like, one of the best songs in the entire game. And this is a game that has so many amazing tracks, but it's such a celebratory tone. It just keeps building and building and building. And then, like, you're trotting through all the worlds that you've played. You see the credits of the enemies, like you mentioned, and it just feels so triumphant. It's not just like a standard credit sequence. And doesn't it end with like a bunch of Yoshis hatching?
Yep. Yeah. There's for fans of Fun and Games who follow us on Twitter, like, that thank you that I always use as a GIF is the thank you screen from this game. Also, I'm glad you brought up the rest of the credits, Brian, because the end of the game, where we see the very, very end, where it says the end and we see Peach, Luigi, and Mario, it's one of the earliest times in a game that we got to see the modern incarnation of those designs, because they were always in the manuals and other things. But even before that, Mario was still a little more squat or cartoony. That's the first time we really saw like that design of them, which was really cool in a game, which will then go on to be how they're designed in all the games to come.
I remember I beat the game for the first time when I was a kid, and my dad, it was like a Wednesday, so he was still traveling, and I wanted to show him that I beat it, so I saved it on that screen for like 3 days.
Wow.
Just left my SNES on.
Oh, jeez.
Love that. Yeah, now we can just take pictures of it on our Switches. I'm glad that this game is available everywhere. It's on the Nintendo Switch Online. It got ported to the Game Boy Advance, which is not the best version, but it's still a very playable version of the game. It was on the Super Mario All-Stars pack when they re-released it. It was on the Virtual Console. I think this is one of the most accessible Mario titles probably in existence at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, all those NES and SNES games, aside from Yoshi's Island, which took a long time to get ported, but Mario 1, 2, 3, and World have just been ported into oblivion, basically, at this point.
Yeah, the All-Stars World oeuvre package, whether it was the NES or the SNES versions.
Yeah, and I think there's a reason for that, right? This is the end of a quadrilogy of really incredible and important games. Arguably, the second game is weird, depending on where you live. But like that said, like I think that the reason this one I think comes up so much and is often lauded as one of the best side-scrolling platformers is because also something we haven't talked about is the level design. Some of the mechanics and designs are things, again, that we never see again, but like from the lava stage where you're jumping to avoid dinosaurs to all of the myriad of different moving platform stages to the block snake stages, which there are several that also kind of almost never appear again. Like, I think that talking about the actual gameplay of this game, it's so dynamic and so unique to this game mostly, except for the jumping, the fire flower, and a few other things. Like, we've never seen another game like this. They took the flying from Mario 3 and built on it, made it more dynamic, and then they pared down the power-ups, so it was just fire flower, Starman, mushroom, Cape Feather, just to make sure that like it was easier to get into, but still mastering the cape. To this day, I can't always fly consistently with the cape, not because it's impossible, but because it is dynamic, it is challenging. And I think that kind of part of this game also, besides all the aesthetic stuff we talked about, is so core to why it's still a legendary game to play, because I don't think there's a stage that repeats, and if it repeats gimmicks, they always iterate on it. There's never the exact same thing in 2 levels like in previous titles.
Yeah. And I do want to point out how odd it is that as a sequel, it pared down the number of power-ups that happened and everything else, where normally it's an arms race. You add more, and in subsequent games, they've definitely been doing that. But by creating like the Fire Flower range attack, I guess, the flight and traversal of the cape, and then they put everything else into Yoshi, which sort of has the functionality of differing either animal suits or whatever else, and Yoshi adds his own element of traversal, of being able to bounce on spinies, of being able to be an additional, like a functional double jump, of all of that, in addition to what they do with how Mario interacts with the world, being able to throw things straight up and drop things more easily. And they integrate this into the level design. They teach it to you and make it easy to find instructions for it without it ever becoming obstructive. And in that sort of streamlining, I feel very little, if nothing, is lost and so much is gained.
Mm-hmm. And even the overworld is tutorialized in that way. And that first world is like, okay, you can see the castle clearly laid out. Like, that's obviously your destination, but there's this other path that goes up this this ladder.
And that's Dinosaur Land 1. That's the one that they level number 1. So it pulls you.
Mm-hmm. So they do such a good job without having to like spell out every little thing. There are some info blocks that you can hit and everything, but like most of the stuff is just like shown, not told.
Yeah. That's the one map screen that doesn't really scroll as far as part of the overworld goes. You need to go up to the Yellow Switch Palace on top of the hill to kind of get that Zelda Breath of the Wild moment of there's so much more out there kind of thing. And we take this for granted now because we know the game so well. I remember back when I believed the rumor that there was a 97th exit. There was that little circle in the cross between everything in the Forest of Illusion, and by gum, I was going to somehow unlock Top Secret Area 2. But nowadays, we know it. But there was so much awe, and it was so well laid out for us.
For sure. I mean, and I'm glad, Brian, you brought up the colored blocks, because even that is shown and not told, right? Like, we're shown where the yellow one is, so you have that no matter what. And it's one of the power-up ones. It's the one that gives you mushrooms, because 2 of them give you power-ups and 2 don't. But then in the later stages, before you find them, you may do a stage where you see the dotted outline of where blocks would be but aren't there. And you go, oh, I guessed. And then you look for secret exits that way. Like, they're always pushing you to find the secrets without saying, hey, go look for secrets. You could also ignore it and just play the game and not get any of them. But if you look at it and engage in those secret exits, and I will say the Forest of Illusion, I still had to look up some of the secret exits because I couldn't remember all of them. Like, but they're there and the hints are there. When I found them, I was like, oh, this is obvious. Of course, now I see it. But like, that's so intuitive in the design, especially that show, not tell kind of oeuvre for the whole game.
And they allow you to traverse it, assail it, go at it, even without unlocking the things that make it more accessible. You can, by going through all of Star Road, if you unlock the first Star Road in World 2 and go all the way around, there's areas where it's like you really want to have unlocked all the Switch Palaces, a little bit of that kind of moderate skill blocking, skill gating. But if you are capable of figuring it out and doing that, just, I don't know, with a cape and getting there, by all means, have fun. They don't say you haven't unlocked that yet. Only auto-scrolling, it holds you back. Everything else is up to you and how you go at it. There's a way to make it easier. There's a way to make it more accessible. There is a clear but vague suggested order of doing things, but they just let you go.
Yeah, and I think also with the power-up, something that's interesting to note, we also haven't talked about the P balloon. There are always P items in different games. Giggle, giggle, P. But, like, you know, we had the P feather, P wing from the third game, which would give you unlimited flight. In this balloon lets you float for a limited amount of time, and while you're floating, and Mario is inflated, which is very funny to look at, you can find secrets, and like never comes back. And like, now that we're so much further along in the timeline of Mario, that's kind of Mario's MO. Besides the Fire Flower and the mushroom, often games just have, you know, in the new Super Mario Brothers games, they did repeat a bunch of stuff, but even those, like, we eventually got the acorn for the squirrel suit. In 3D World and 3D Land, we got the cat suits. Like, all of these different things that then Mario moves on. And, you know, think about both Galaxy games had unique power-ups that never show up again. Odyssey and 64 have completely different kinds of power-ups that we never see again. I think all of that stuff is really interesting, and that at the time I was like, where'd my frog suit go? Why can't I be Tanuki anymore? Whereas now I'm just like, all right, well, that's the gimmick for this game. Like, it's kind of become part of the Mario legend is the power-ups, and what kind of wacky power-ups will we get now? Like, if we ever get an Odyssey 2, what kind of power-ups or mechanics will we have versus the first game? With Wonder, which you mentioned earlier, Brian, like, we saw Mario can become an elephant. We don't know why, but he can, and I'm happy for all of my furry friends. Like, you know, now you've got a new cosplay, but like, or a new outfit, but like,
oh my god, if I go to a convention and I see a person walking around as Elephant Mario, I didn't even handle it well when it happened on my screen. I will not handle it well if I see it in real life.
But
That's fair.
It's totally fair, but it's one of those things where it's like, Mario power-ups are so integral to, I think, side-scrolling platformers, but even more specifically Mario and Super Mario World, because again, we never get this combination of power-ups again. We often will still get a flying thing, a shooting thing, but like, I think the cape is probably, I'll say it, cape is one of the best power-ups they've ever invented for Mario.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I would take it over to the raccoon tail any day. I mean, it's the reason that I think they use the I guess technically a Tanuki tail is that it's more visually distinct, right? Like that appeared in the Mario movie, and that appeared in Super Mario 3D Land because it's so visually distinct from the cape, right? Like the cape, it's like, okay, Mario turned into a superhero, and it's like that's just kind of generic, especially today when half the movies are superhero movies.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that they would use the Tanuki tail instead of the cape for like the visual uniqueness of it. However, like I am team cape 100%.
Yeah, it's the perfect in between of the raccoon tail, the Tanuki tail, and the P-Wing, where you can have flight the entire stage if you can handle it, if you can pull it off. And I suppose they can also go the Tanuki tail because kids don't have easy access to a fake raccoon tail and then jump off the couch thinking they can fly. I don't know if that's their thought process, but that just occurred to me now. Although I also want to point out, I kind of love and hate and love the way that they do the item box in Super Mario World. You have at the top of the screen where your backup power-up is. At any time, you can press select and it will slowly come down the center of the screen and you can get it. Or if you lose your current power-up, that one drops down. And you don't control that, which then lends a sort of playing to lose or trying to chase that down. And are you able to get that? Can you not get that? And they don't often screw you over, but you can often screw yourself over in terms of panic trying to grab the next thing. And frankly, I enjoy that as methodical and slow, or however, Sega does what Nintendo wants you to feel about Super Mario World. Those moments of tension, especially if you lose those in the middle of a castle fight or going after any of that, I love those moments. I hate when I lose it, but I love those moments.
Yeah, totally. Also, if you don't spin Mario repeatedly after getting the cape every time, I don't want to know you. Because literally, even when I booted it up a couple days ago, first thing I did as soon as I count the spinning sound, it's like it echoes in my head because you could essentially turn Mario into a tornado, which was often what I did.
It's the Mario equivalent of when you pick up a pair of tongs and you have to click them together like 2 or 3 times.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. You have to.
Yes.
It's just required. I'm glad that we all have the same neuroses and OCD. I'm amongst my people. Before we start to wrap up, I want to talk about some favorites. I mean,
oh god,
I like I mentioned before, I think so it's so hard to pick a favorite stage, right? There's so many and they're so different, but I think if I could pick a genre of stage, it would be the ghost houses. As much as they drive me crazy sometimes, they have some of the coolest puzzle solving and design, especially since later in the game they are similar to each other intentionally, so you forget which secret exit is the right secret exit because it might have been in a different place in a different stage. I just love how they use the P blocks to turn blocks to coins and vice versa,
and make secret doors
like that whole design. And so while it's hard to pick one single ghost house specifically, I think the ghost houses as a whole are my favorite because I love and hate them, and I think they're some of the best Mario design that we just don't really see anymore.
Yeah.
The ghost houses are incredible. It's just more of I remember hating them as a kid because I would get so confused by some of them. But as an adult, when I go back and play them, I absolutely love kind of like the puzzle solving that is required in a lot of them, and like kind of just like a trial and error, but not in a way that's like, oh, I failed, so I'm gonna die. It's no, I failed. I have to go back to the start and then like maybe try a different routes, like a slightly different path through this. And it just eventually, when you emerge and you find the way out of it, it just feels so good. And I'm with you. The ghost houses are amazing.
Yeah,
Also-
I wish. Yeah, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I also love the little detail we didn't mention before. If you have Yoshi at a ghost house or a castle, Yoshi is afraid to go inside.
That's
so
right.
You have to go without him, mostly because they didn't want to break the design of those stages. They really wanted you to have a specific traversal in only those places, which I think is really funny.
And it's a good in-universe explanation for why.
Yeah.
And the cutscene is skippable. You understand from the get-go, oh, we're going into a structure. Yoshi doesn't go in there. Yoshi doesn't go indoors.
Yes, exactly.
Yoshi's
He's an
not allowed
outdoor pet.
indoors. He's not housebroken. That's the problem.
Right, exactly.
But I mean, it does feel a little basic to just be like, oh, yeah, we all agree. But I think, yeah, the ghost houses, I'll say it, it lets Nintendo kind of be jerks.
Yeah.
And not in a way of like a Kaizo trap, or you end up in somewhere where you go, well, you can't escape that, lol. It becomes a thing of, wait, I unlocked that secret door. Which secret door? There's more than one kind of thing. So they can give you false hope. They can give you those. And none of them are overly long stages or full of a lot to remember within that specific ghost house. They let it be its own mini puzzle that goes on. And I love it for that.
So I'll try and be a little bit different here. The ghost houses, yes, we've sung the praises of that. I'm gonna start with one that immediately came to mind, and that is the ghost ship.
Oh, yeah.
And that
yeah,
not
yeah.
only for the fact that it's like a fun, mostly underwater, well, it's an underwater level, basically, but like the storytelling behind that of like, this is a crashed airship from I almost said Sonic 3, Mario 3.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so cool. Like when I realized that, like after I played through it, I was like, oh, that's weird. Like, why does Bowser have a pirate ship? And I was like, oh wait, these are the ships that we were taking down in Mario 3. That's incredible. Like that was such a cool realization. And I think I like it more for that than I do the stage itself. But then also like the world that immediately precedes that, the Chocolate Island. Yeah, Chocolate Island it just has some of the coolest like enemies and like some of the world design. And I don't know, it just always makes me hungry when I play it. So I like that. And then if we wanted to zero in on one specific level, another one that stuck out in me, it is in the special zone, Tubular.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the one where you have to use the pea balloon and basically just like float through like a balloon obstacle course.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That one is a lot of fun.
And very challenging too, which is what I like about it. It's like it's short, but it also like is so distinct from anything else in the game that like I don't know, I just have a blast with it every single time.
I would like to single out one of the Butter Bridge levels. I think it is the one right before the castle, where it is for the most part hanging from ropes, dealing with the saw blades kind of moving on their pattern, and you have to kind of climb and traverse. It is super easy to just fly over all of it if you want to, except for the fact that it has a secret exit.
Yeah.
And it is the one that leads to Soda Lake. It is the one that leads down to Star Road. Okay, so it's not the one right before the castle. But in order to get there, you have to fly under the goal. And I think it's the first time in the game where you have to do something like that. That's not the only time that happens in Mario World, but I think it's the first one that happens as far as like level order goes.
Right.
And so if you are going to fly over all of those saw blades, you then have to figure out when, where, how. You're going to have to deal with them at some point because there's not enough room after the last saw blade to like have a nice descent. Because if you drop, like you do a big dive, you can't pull out of it. If you any of that, and it becomes its own little puzzle. Can you easily get through it? Yeah. But if you want to get everything, it's a nice, I feel, thesis of a lot of the cool challenges that Mario World throws in, like dealing with all those saw blades. I have so much fun where it's like a weird timing maze. And also that idea of like, do you just want to get through the level? Do you want to get everything? Do you want to engage with the challenge? What do you want of this? And it's not an overly long level, but it's not a single screen. I feel it's a nice, whether it's my favorite or not, I don't know, but it's one that stuck out to me as we're talking about this is kind of a nice ideal of what Super Mario World gave us and why certainly I keep coming back to it.
For sure, yeah. Really quick, some favorite songs. I mean, I mentioned it before, but the Bowser theme in this game is one of the best Bowser themes ever, and my second favorite Mario song ever. The Mario Brothers 3 Bowser theme is unbeatable. It comes back in Super Mario RPG, which is my favorite version of it, and we're going to get another version of it later this year, which is also my favorite thing. But like that Bowser theme, like, again, it's creepy. It's ominous. Like Bowser feels like a threat in this in a way that, like, he sort of did in 3, but he wasn't in 2, and in 1 he was just he was the threat until the 8th world, and you were like, all right, I've already done this a bunch of times, we're fine.
It's actually him this time.
Yeah, it's actually not one of his minions or whatever. But I love how like absolutely ominous the whole thing is, and it's like once the battle starts, it kicks up. Like it's just this really cool, awesome interactive song. And like Brian talked earlier about songs that fit the what's happening in the stage, and that song for sure is like the pinnacle of like this fits this fight and is in tune with the fight.
I love in the Vanilla Dome, kind of like just once you're in the stage, and it's just like such a minimalist song, but it fits the tone of like spelunking through this Vanilla Dome. And it's I don't know, it's just the way the guitar kind of starts kicking in after like the do 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 do, like it matches it so perfectly, and it's such a beautiful song that you don't expect from like a 2D platforming game, because at that point like everything is kind of like high energy, like there's it's meant to propel you forward, and then that is just like kind of this chill vibe that like it was like the lo-fi version of the songs before the lo-fi craze even existed.
Yeah.
And then I really like the overworld theme of Forest of Illusion.
Sure. Classic.
Also evocative, yeah. I would definitely say that Vanilla Dome is, when I try to think of my earliest memories of playing Mario World, they're all in Vanilla Dome. It's the feeling of the music of the overworld. It's seeing the dinosaurs pop out of the lava. Probably my favorite one that I always come back to is the athletic theme, the doodle kind of thing. And part of that is the fact that it's really a lot of fun. It definitely is even more high energy, high octane than all of the other overworld and level music that they're doing. And it always is connected to a very funny memory for me of, I live in an apartment in New York City. Sometimes you hear things from your neighbors, and sometimes you hear them practicing music. Sometimes they hear me practicing music, and I hope they enjoy it. But regardless, I was hearing someone playing the piano, and you know those times you hear something, you go, that's familiar. What is that? And you spend the next few minutes trying to figure it out. This was somebody slowly but surely, but competently playing the athletic theme. Like it was kind of like a like kind of thing. And I'm like, what is it? And once I got the dun 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 dun, okay. Oh, and I just like sat next to my bedroom window, just listening to them work their way through it for half an hour. And that is the influence of Mario, and that is the influence of Super Mario World. And so that just always puts a smile on my face. So I for reasons outside the game, but also because it's a great jam, that's my pick.
This reminds me that, you know, I think the Guitar Hero is pretty much dead as a franchise at this point. But if they ever wanted to come back and just collaborate with Nintendo for a Switch exclusive Guitar Hero, just have it be Nintendo music, like that would be the way back.
They did DDR.
They did. I think that would actually be very popular if there was just like even if it was just Mario and Zelda, like just give us that. Like that would be incredible. Like 100 songs from those games.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Cadence of Hyrule was a huge hit, and like that's basically a rhythm game with Zelda stuff.
So good.
So good.
They can figure something out, I think. Yeah, maybe not the guitar, but something.
Some sort of instrument, some sort of I mean,
that's not Wii music because nobody played Wii music.
So let me ask you guys
this. Maybe will they play Switch music?
Oh yeah, who knows?
Well, they played Wii Sports, but nobody played Switch Sports, so
that's also
all right. Yeah. So inverse. Okay, got it.
When you guys do Mario Maker, is the Mario World theme your go-to like it is mine?
So I'm not a big Mario Maker person, only because I don't have that creative brain. Like I love playing Mario Maker stages, but making them, it's tough. The Mario World theme is probably one of the best. So it's either that or something from Mario 3. Like that's what I would have while I'm on that screen.
Yeah, I think I favor Mario World. It's the right amount of it's got it all and feels great.
Yeah.
It just looks so good. Like, again, like the NES, especially Mario 3, still looks great, but Mario World just doesn't look like it's aged today, even though it's a game from 30 years ago.
Yeah, I think Mario 3, I have specific ideas when I use that theme, but Mario World is just, let's get started, let's make something, let's have fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I had that thought even, like I said, just playing it this week as of when we're recording. Like, I looked at this game and I'm like, this game is gorgeous. It is aged perfectly. Whereas even the new Super Mario Brothers games, which I do enjoy, like Brian said, they're fine. They're competent and fun games. The style hasn't aged well because it's sort of polygonal. It's sort of like 3D, 2D, and it's like they look okay, but like I still think Super Mario World, Super Mario 3 look better because of the pixel design. But I'm also, endlessly on the show, I talk about how pixels have aged better than polygons. We've done whole episodes on it. That's a whole other conversation. But I agree. I think Super Mario World is one of the best overall designs that they've ever done for a Mario game.
I mean, all you have to do is look at, like, if they announced a Mario World, like, modern remake tomorrow, you'd be like, oh, I don't know if that's needed. But if they announced a Mario 64 modern remake, you'd be like, hell yeah, dude. Like, that rules.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, that's
very
absolutely
telling.
true. Well, Brian, thank you for joining us for this. I'm so glad that we got to have this love fest for one of the greatest side-scrolling platformers ever made, or in your opinion, the one. Before we wrap up, I would love for you, and then me and Geoff can wrap up the show, plug where you can be found online, your show, All Things Nintendo, and of course your incredible work over at Game Informer.
Yeah, sure. GameInformer.com is where you can find all my work. All Things Nintendo is the podcast, comes out every single Friday. We're coming up on 100 episodes, so it's been going for a minute now. But yeah, just basically all the news, all the reviews, all the previews of everything in the world of Nintendo. Also do kind of like a list most episodes of like ranking our top 5 blank, something usually Nintendo related. And then we also do a segment called eShop Gem of the Week, where somebody brings a game that's on the eShop that maybe is a lesser known title, just kind of surface it, give it some love. Outside of that, you can find me at Brian P. Shea across pretty much every social media platform, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram. I'm at least temporarily back on Twitter just because trying to get some people to kind of like redirect them over to my Threads account, and we'll see how that goes. But also I have some stuff coming up here that I'm going to want to promote. So it helped to have, my account with more than 10,000 followers back to kind of get that stuff promoted. And I also
sounds like it.
I leveraged that to also get verified on Instagram. Finally, I was like, what? I'm just going to reactivate this. Say like, hey, look, I have over 10,000 followers on Twitter. Please verify me on Instagram, and they actually fell for it. So that all works out.
Amazing.
The algorithm goes both ways.
Exactly.
Yeah, sure does. Well, thank you, Brian, for joining us. It was a blast to have you. It's
Thank
been
you
a
so
blast
much.
working with you.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
On and off over at Game Informer. I love editing that show. And I love your show, All Things Nintendo. As a Nintendo obsessive, which anyone who listens to this show knows both Geoff and I are, your show is great. Your coverage of Tears of the Kingdom when that was coming out and came out was incredible. Stuff you did with Kyle Hilliard, all that stuff was really great. So keep doing that awesome stuff. From one Nintendo fan to another, it's a great show.
I really appreciate that. That means a lot because like it started off actually as a column. I was just going to be a written column every 2 weeks, and I was talking with our former editor-in-chief Andrew Reiner, and he was like, you know what, maybe this could be a podcast. And I was like, maybe it could. And then that kind of was like, I recorded like a pilot just by myself, and then I was like, I should have a guest, and yeah, it just kind of evolved from there, and it's just kind of gone. And it's a one-man show usually, like aside from my guest. Like I write it, I edit it, I produce it, I do all that stuff, and obviously host it. So it's kind of like a scrappy one-man operation over there, but it's a fun labor of love, and I'm glad that people seem to enjoy it, and I appreciate your kind words.
Those that are here that regularly listen to Fun and Games that have not checked out All Things Nintendo, support Brian. Check that out. We know how much it takes to produce a podcast. This man is working hard.
Yes. Also, thank you for being here through this well over an hour episode that we tried to keep to 45 minutes, but we're talking about one of the greatest games ever made. Sometimes that's a challenge. You can, of course, find Fun and Games in all sorts of places. Specifically, we're most active on Twitter, Fun and Games Pod. You can also join our Patreon. While we don't normally plug that on the side quest, although it's always in the show notes, since Geoff and I are both here, it's a good time to talk about how we are Patreon funded. You get early access to episodes like this. You also get bonus episodes. You get shout outs in episodes. We really appreciate those who are contributing. Again, with the health site that is Twitter, and as it goes down in flames, as Brian alluded to, this is the best way to stay in touch with us. So if you've got $3, $5, or $10, we really appreciate it. Also, rating and a review. Go rate us and review us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Go rate All Things Nintendo in those places too. Rating and reviewing a podcast is the best way to get us out to a larger audience, and we are grateful for everyone who gets to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also check out certainpov.com to find not only this show, this feed, but also all the other fantastic Certain POV podcasts that are being put out, as well as a permanent invite link to our Discord server where we continue these sort of conversations. And when Matt and I play through games, post screenshots, talk about them, and plenty of other folks do, and we get to gush about the games there as well.
Yes, and as always, we really appreciate folks listening to Side Quest. This series has been one of my favorite things I've ever made, and I have a lot of things that I've made because of the love we get to share for these games we love. And so I guess with that all being said, I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
I'm Geoff Moonen.
And happy gaming.
Do you feel like you're the only person in your circle who wants to go deep about video games regularly?
We were like that too. Until now.
Welcome to Crossplay Conversations, the brand new bi-weekly topical video game podcast from Luke Lewis,
Joseph Hooper,
and Jacob McCord.
With many years of breaking it down separately on shows like the Left Behind Game Club, Player Podcast, and Lukewarm Games, the gang is finally coming together to publish their gaming group chat in audio form every other week.
Expect roundtable reviews of the latest games, profiles of upcoming indies, and insightful conversations about essential topics in the video game industry. All with a mostly positive, insightful, and fun style.
Crossplay Conversations debuts on August 1st with brand new episodes hitting every other Tuesday. Help us out by subscribing on your podcast platform of choice to get the first episodes delivered straight to your feed.
And follow us on Twitter at Crossplay Convos for updates about the show.
Cheers and happy gaming.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.